Hi everyone, I'm Nancy Littlejohn with Nancy Littlejohn Fine Art in Houston, Texas, and we're here today to visit with legendary Texas artist McKay Otto. He has a very special exhibit in the gallery right now in our viewing room called Truthful Peeks. It's a show of minis, which is something that we have not done together before. So I just want to jump right into asking McKay a few questions about the exhibit. And the first one is, can we talk about the title, Truthful Peeks? How did you choose that and what was inspired?
Nancy, it came about this moment. We're living in a time where we're surrounded with so many lies. I mean, they're coming at us from everywhere. And it's a time for truth.
It is.
Truth, trust, and the peaks, these are little peeks into your inner self and maybe the entire universe, if you'll take the time to just be silent enough to go there. That's your truth. That's where you find your truth within.
Well, it's such a beautiful title, and the show is just, as the audience will be able to see, has just so many thoughtful moments. And the exhibit is so well curated. You and I really enjoyed being in here and working with every little tiny aspect of this installation. And we have always worked with large paintings for your solo shows, for example, or your solo booth at Expos Chicago. So this is so different from the larger traditional works. How did you decide to work on minis?
Again, it's time. I wanted to convince myself that I could work small, just as well small as large. Yeah, I think, a really good mini will do just the same thing as a big painting if it's the right wall or the right space. Take, for instance, these little pieces, like that piece can hold an entire wall.
Right.
If it's the right wall. Can you imagine that at the end of a long hallway, just that little statement?
I agree. So, McKay, how would you like these smaller works to be experienced differently than the larger work? Because your larger work is very powerful as well. But I agree with what you're saying. One little tiny gem at the end of the hallway has just as much power, right?
I think so.
I do too.
Or you could take one of these pieces, any of these, and put it on a pedestal. Very similar to this. You put it out and put it on a shelf.
I love that, actually.
They can rest where they're comfortable. I think you can find a comfort in these. And when you look at that installation that we did with those 4 pieces, I mean, it does everything that a big painting would do.
Right. I agree. And with this wall, this little line of blocks, I wasn't thinking of installing them that way. And you came in and just very naturally said, they need to go just like this. And I love that people interpret things differently. And with these minis, you really can do that. So let's talk about the importance of found objects in your work, because a lot of people don't realize that you have been working with found objects throughout the entire, breadth of your practice. From the very beginning, you've worked with found objects.
Well, you know, Nancy, when I came back from Los Angeles in the, that was the late 80s, early 90s, I had no money. I had to sell my bed. I had a brass bed. It gave me enough money to pay for the gas to get back to Houston.
Amazing.
And I had nothing. And I went to the Glasselle school, and they were enrolling. It was an enrollment period, and Alan Hacklin was the director there. I had put together just a little package of my drawings, and he looked at them and he said, "What would you like to take?" And I said, "I would like to take advanced painting." He said, "Did you have beginner painting?" I said, "No." He said, "McKay, have you ever sculpted?" I said, "I had a sculpting class." I said, "No." I went into Ben Latina's class, and in 3 weeks we had our first critique, and they thought I'd been sculpting for maybe 20 years.
You were just naturally taken to it.
Yeah. When you know, you know. And so I came back to Texas, okay, no money. Alan got me in. They created these scholarships, which still exist today, but they created a scholarship for me so I could study at the Glasselle. And I took sculpting and advanced painting.
Amazing.
Later to come back, and I did the critiques on the advanced classes for Terrell James.
Nice, very nice.
In order to survive in that period, I got involved by going to junk shops and estate sales and resale shops, and I literally opened with this couple down in Galveston. We opened a shop called The Treasure Hunt.
Amazing.
It was on the Strand. It was one of the early shops on the Strand. And Lynn and I would go to, more me, I'd go to garage sales, estate sales. And it was a time when the first cruise ships were coming in to Galveston.
Interesting.
And people would come in and buy all of this stuff.
Wow.
But a lot of things got broken. And that's what I started making art out of, the broken, discarded stuff. That dovetailed what was happening with me at the Glasselle.
Okay.
I had no money for art supplies. So they had a big junk pile outside of the sculpture department. And that's where all my early works came out of that.
That's incredible. I don't think most people know this story, McKay, but it's really the kind of quintessential, what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention, right? You just have to make the best use of available resources. And that has been an incredible tradition in the art world for generations and centuries. I mean, when you think about gorgeous little Joseph Cornell boxes and things like that. So I have had the fortunate experience of going to McKay's studio many times, and it never ceases to amaze me the depth and breadth of the work. I mean, people really don't know how long you've been doing this. So in his studio, I will notice things like a beautiful crutch that has been, I call it shrouded. So you have always had this way of covering things. I call it a shroud. Will you talk a little bit about why you always love to cover an object, be it formally through a large painting or a little object like this?
Nancy, my mentor, Agnes Martin, said it better than anybody.
Okay.
She said, McKay, the reason I love your work so much, you've always been trying to make the material world go away.
Okay.
It started the day you put the first pantyhose over your object. And it actually, she said, it even went beyond that, because when you could go and look at a pile of junk and make an art piece out of it, you had created something out of the material world that didn't exist. But the key element of this work and this practice has been covering it.
Definitely.
And I think she said it best, because when you look in any of these pieces, the material world goes away. When you look through that transparent, translucent canvas, we leave this world and we go to the other world that surrounds us and is within us.
Right.
And something we forget is we get so attached to this material world.
Definitely. So I want to ask you something, because we were talking about the crutches. And we have never talked about this before, but McKay, have you ever been to Sanctuario de Chimayo in Santa Fe?
I'm trying to think.
It is a church where it is, it's a pilgrimage, and only second to Lord is in the World, which is in France, where people make pilgrimages.
I know that place.
Okay, yes. So Sanctuario de Chimayo is a little tiny sanctuary right outside of Santa Fe. It is beautiful, and people travel from all over the world for the healings. So you go into the main sanctuary, and then there's a little tiny door to the left, and when you walk in, there's another little tiny door. In that door is a hole with dirt that replenishes itself. And people take the dirt for the healing. Wow. Okay, and in that little room, the walls are lined with crutches and stories of the people who have been healed there.
Wow.
It's incredibly beautiful for so many different reasons. So for me, knowing your relationship to Agnes and Taos and being in Santa Fe, I wonder if he's ever been to Sanctuario de Chimayo and seen all the crutches, and then taking all of your experience with Agnes, you started covering these things. To me, it's incredibly profound.
So,
okay,
you just opened a door for me. I forget the year, but Dr. Ernest Flores, she was teaching at Rice University, invited me to come to Ecuador. And she was one of the great art writers, historians. She was the curator of the bank collections, some of the major collections down in Ecuador and all over South America, actually. She took me to, I want to call it a baño. And it was where these rivers converged in Ecuador. And there was a church there. And people, this was some of the inspiration.
Amazing.
It was a place where people went to be healed. And there was a room where people would leave their crutches and all of these, devices that they had. They were healed, and they would walk out.
Amazing.
And so, yes, in a different spot, a different time,
right.
It probably had, well, it did. It had an effect. The pieces that you're referring to, I had a solo show at the Corpus Christi Museum many years ago, and those pieces came out of, they were in that show down there, which Holly Johnson curated.
Oh my goodness, my goodness.
Yeah.
So we have a question about the found objects specifically. So it's a good question. It says, do you find an object and then transform it into a work, or do you seek out pieces to be transformed? So you have a gorgeous property in Texas, and I know you spend a lot of time on the property. So do you go out hunting for things, or do you just come across something and you pick it up because you thought it was interesting?
It's an interesting question. I really like that question because Nancy, I'm lucky. I've got a great resale shop in Wimberley.
Okay.
And I make a pilgrimage, a point of being there probably 2 times a week.
Okay.
And I walk in, and I've already meditated, and I just ask the universe. And it's interesting, every one of these pieces have come out of that resale shop. And I see the piece, it's interesting, it sparks my vision. And I think, that's an art piece, but how does it become a McKay?
Right.
Because the universe has to work through me to create that dimension. And my work is all about light. It's actually, I go one step further. It's the indirect reflection of light and color, which creates ethereal light. That's what you see in a sunset.
Right.
That's the colors and the light you see in a sunrise. That's the color you see in a rainbow. And it can't be painted.
Right.
It has to be reflected. So what you've got in this entire body of work, the color is reflected. It's ethereal. It's as close to the universe as I can possibly get. Agnes Martin told me she'd spent her whole life trying to get to ethereal light, and she kept saying, McKay, you're the artist that's going to go there. You've got to go beyond me. And I said, what does that mean? She said, it's in you, it will happen. And when I combine that with our talks, she and I would talk about Rothko and how he had spent his entire life trying to reach that ethereal light also. She felt that. I can feel it in his work, but it is a direct, she said her paintings were a direct reflection of the color. The light hits it, it's two-dimensional, and it reflects.
Right, right.
She said there's got to be a way to get ethereal light, which you can't paint. It creates itself. And that's the indirect reflection. And she said, don't do it with electricity. If it has an electric cord running to it, it'll be a gimmick.
So you just answered, you sort of answered my next question, because we have a question about the colors of the work, but I think you've sort of touched on that in that it's the indirect reflection of light and the kinds of light that comes through nature, like a sunset or something that you can't put your hands on, right?
Right.
It's something that you have to feel and see. But a lot of your work to me is influenced by, and you're a part of that light and space movement with the Larry Bell, Mary Kors, Robert Irwin, and then we just talked about Agnes saying, but it can't have a cord. So how do you feel that your work fits into that style of painting? I mean, do you consider yourself to be a light and space artist, or do you think you've transcended that?
I think this goes beyond.
Yeah.
I really do. Have you ever seen paintings do this?
No. No. I know a lot of artists try.
But have you ever seen it?
Right. No.
What's happening here? You know, when I think of Terrell, I love the work. But Agnes and I talked about that. She said, McKay, that's man-made light. It comes from a light bulb. It's man-made. Ethereal light is made with the universe.
Right.
It's actually the purest truth you can get.
So, McKay, is that where you draw your colors from the universe? I mean, someone specifically asked, how do you choose your colors?
Well, I've had to explore color in a different way because it's a reflection. And when you look inside these, you're going to see colors that reflect. And they have to be able to reflect off of each other because I'm doing multiple colors in these.
Okay.
If you do the wrong color, it kills the other reflection.
Okay.
So you got to have a pure reflection. And everything you're seeing in these pieces is indirect. You're not looking at it. I mean, you look at the green there.
Right.
You're not looking at a painted green surface. It is a reflected. You can look at any of them. This right here, that's a white piece. And it's the way I've applied the paint. It reflects on the white. And you get that softness that you can't paint.
So in their own unique way, these are a kind of color studies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really are. And I have used the little ones to get me to the big ones.
Okay. So a lot of these pieces are see-through or transparent or translucent. Can you talk about that transparency and why with these maybe boxes, for example, how you can see through them?
Yeah. So I found myself in Santa Fe in the summers for like 11 years in Santa Fe, 2 in Taos. I'd go up for 3 months, and 1 year in Santa Fe, I went to I took wax classes the whole summer. I got back to Houston, and I did everything they said, and the wax moved. So I had an art piece that wasn't my intention, and I lived in the Heights, in a 9,000 square foot warehouse for years, 18 years? And my studio, I couldn't afford air conditioning, so I had heat plus insects. Bugs would get in, and I found that they loved the wax.
Interesting.
So I was at Artisans one day on South Main, and they're so helpful there. They're just nice people.
Very.
And I said, what can I use? Is there an acrylic that I can get the same effect that you get with wax? And that's how this all started.
Okay.
So if you look, they look acoustic, but they're not. They're 100% gold and acrylic. The best art supply in the world. And she had a golden, she said, you've tried everything else, why don't you try this? And it's the same thing with the fabric. I had to buy the world's supply of this particular fabric. They stopped making it, and one of the oldest fabric dealers in New York went out in New Jersey to the factory, called me because I just had a sellout show in New York, and I wanted to order twice the amount of fabric that I normally ordered. And he said, he just almost started crying. He said, they'll never make this again. And he went out and found enough of the special particles that go in here into these pieces. And he said, there's enough to make 5,500 yards. That's a lot of fabric.
That's a lot of fabric.
And I said, what is that going to cost me? And he told me, and I said, I don't have that kind of money. It's expensive.
Sure, of course.
And Bobby Lemons, she and Linda Durham had this gallery in New York and Chelsea. And that's where it showed. And Bobby says, I just sold 2 of your big paintings to one of the big collectors in Chicago. And I said, well, how much do I get? She told me the amount, it was the exact amount to buy all of the fabric. And so
that's a great story.
That's how I ended up with the world's supply. And I had tried maybe, I'm going to say 50, 60 different fabrics. And what happens with fabric, there's dye in it. And I needed a fabric that would stretch. And I tried everything. And I was at London Fabric and Kim. Beautiful, beautiful Asian lady there that I'd been buying stuff. She said, why don't you try this fabric? And I said, oh no, it's sparkly. It's got all these silver things in it. It'll never work. Took it home, and when I applied the acrylic, it was perfect.
Amazing.
Because it was reflecting light. And you don't, it goes away when you see it.
So it goes straight to the heart of your work and the theory behind everything that you do, really.
And you know, as a kid, I was always fascinated with the ice capades.
Okay.
And this is the fabric that Peggy Fleming, they made it specially for Peggy Fleming,
Incredible.
The skater, because she kept tearing her nylons, and all of the skaters were. This was the fabric they used with the ice capades, and it's the toughest nylon that's probably ever been invented.
Incredible.
It's amazing, and I'm able to do this. And
on a small scale, but also on a very large scale.
Yeah. And Nancy, this is the only fabric that I found that the dyes, this stays white. All the others would turn different colors.
Sure.
And what you've got is pure, beautiful white, a white aesthetic that money can't buy.
Right. It's very pure. So pure.
So that's the material.
That's the material. So I want to just thank you for being with us today and the opportunity to have a beautiful, truthful conversation. And I think people will really appreciate getting to know you better and your process, kind of starting from the very beginning to where you are today.
Yeah.
It's been a joy having you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank
it's a
you.
joy
to
joy. Be at Nancy Littlejohn Fine Art. I
thank
really
you.
mean that.
Thank
You
you.
came to me and you said, I'm going to do a gallery. And my eyes and my ears were wide open. And you're doing everything you dreamed.
Thank you.
Your dream is coming true, Nancy.
Thank you.
As mine does in each one of these pieces.
That's exactly right. Well, McKay, I will never forget when I was planning to open the gallery, I went to see you at your studio, and we just had our typical great afternoon and great lunch, and I have such high regard and respect for you and your practice. I was not going to ask you to show with me or be a part of my program because I felt like it would be too presumptuous. And I thought, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And I'll never forget, you were getting out of the car and you turned around and you looked at me and you said, "I'm going to show with you." And I thought, oh, good. So I think that was a really unique start to this, but it was based on a friendship that goes back a long way.
And so here we are.
And here we are. Here we are.